Right.
Bless Colin. The opportunity to play in a fantasy world, and what does he do? I want to work in food service. Okay.
Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a D&D 5th edition actual play show set in the Eberron campaign world. I'm Philip.
And I'm Eric.
And as you can see, this is another Khyber Shards Answers episode, where we take questions from our viewers through our Discord and talk a little bit about characters. And we have Eric today, and we haven't had Eric in a little bit
Yes.
for various reasons. I don't know. But yeah,
Ari's just not that exciting. Nobody wants
that's
to
what it
talk about
is.
him.
Yeah. Ari's
Very
never the
vanilla
center of
plain character.
anything dramatic.
Yeah.
Going
Doesn't
on.
really speak up much. Kind of hangs in the background. So
Just sticks to the back. You know, you need those characters though.
yeah.
You need those nice background players. Those are useful.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
One would
been
be
a while
useful in
since-
this campaign. I mean,
wow. Well, it's been a while since we checked in on Ari. Has Ari been surprising you in the way that he's been developing, or developing kind of along lines that you foresaw?
you know, I feel like a lot of the stuff that we've been doing, and I feel like the arc that we've recorded that's unreleased is the first time in a while I felt like Ari has gotten a chance to do a thing that Ari is good at in the context of an arc. Like the Boggle Hunt was Ari just there to help. Like,
Yeah.
but it's not like chasing down a monster and dealing with it isn't his skill set or in his wheelhouse. And you know, obviously with the eco terrorism, he was having a tense breakfast with Esri the whole time. So I do think the one thing that has surprised me is the conversation with Tommel. I feel like, because when we were talking about Ari, Ari was very like anti-establishment, very like burn it all down kind of thing. And I think being confronted with somebody that's actually there, as opposed to Ari being on the path to getting there, caused Ari to be a little bit like, whoa, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Like, we don't need to just kill people in the street for looking at us funny, which I never intended Ari to get to that point. But it was just funny to see the first opportunity Ari had to exist in that space was with the opposite extreme with which I thought. Like, I figured we were going to be dealing with the houses and, like, people established in the establishment, and Ari could be like, but instead it was like, whoa, I don't know if I want to go that far. So, but that's been the only thing that's been really surprising in the last handful of episodes we've done since the last time I was on here is, and other than that, you know, the party dynamics are ever evolving and always interesting.
Sure.
And, never what you really expect going into session 0, and I think that's true for any campaign. But yeah, I mean, I kind of knew that Ari and Pog were going to have a certain rapport just because the players were going to have a certain, like me and Colin were going to gravitate towards each other and play off of each other. So that's not surprising. I've really enjoyed how Ari has developed in the context of Shade and Esri, though, and I think it's been really interesting to see what has become true of Ari that I didn't consider before the campaign started, in the context like Ari is a hardcore enabler. Granted, Shade's doing stuff that he totally believes in and is like, yeah, that's great. And that's once again something that comes up more in the upcoming arc. But yeah, Ari is very much like, does not chastise people, like does not. And, you know, he's 22. Like,
Sure.
I think the only 22-year-old that's ever chastised me is you when we were both 22. But and it was warranted, just so everybody knows.
Right.
But yeah, you know, Ari is just very much like, yeah, it'll work out. It'll work out. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. So yeah, that level of enabling that he does for Shade and Pog especially, I think is interesting and not something I was expecting. So
Those are problems for future Ari.
yeah,
Future Ari will
that guy
figure
will
that
deal
out.
with it.
He'll be
Actually,
smarter.
it's a
than
problem
you.
for Esri. Like Esri will be the one. No, yeah. Future Ari will be smarter and more mature and know how to deal with these problems when they come up. But Ari right now
Punt.
does not want to and does not need to, so he will not. So
Nice. All right. So we had a question about Ari's background that I'm curious about because this sort of speaks to the period, the murky period in the after the escape and before we picked up in Stormreach from Laura. Do you think Ari ever attempted to check on what became of Sarah? Who, for context here, because I had to remember, Ari mentioned that there was a girl in Khyber. Yeah, there was a girl in Khyber that he had thought he might get back to one day when his nomadic life was over. But of course, then the morning happened.
Yep. And no, I mean, I don't think he would have. He obviously wouldn't have had the opportunity to when they were traveling across Khyber because it was like we gotta go. And then once he got into Stormreach, the only way to communicate over that kind of distance is through the houses, and so he wouldn't have felt comfortable trying to go to a House Civis enclave to send word and try to figure that out. And so, no, I think he has mourned Sarah. He mourned Sarah when he was in the program because that's when the morning happened, and has moved on with his life for better or worse. But he didn't really ever think that there was a point in checking on her. The fact that Tom will escape the morning might down the road cause that thought to creep into his head of I just assumed everybody died. But no, it never came up on his radar to go check on Sarah. He mourned her, he mourned his loss and moved on with his life. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Sad, but that makes sense. Yeah.
Because I mean, in the context in which he found out about her death, or the morning rather, there would have been nothing he could have done because he was in the program. So he just would have felt impotent, for lack of a better term, to do anything, and just sat there and cried. So yeah.
Eric asks, what are Ari's feelings on his old world creeping closer to his current world? Does he feel he can ever leave it behind, or does he want to leave it behind? And presumably this is in the context of Falco showing up.
Falco. Okay, I was wondering...
and possibly Tommel as well.
Yeah.
Bits
and also,
of the program, I guess.
Yeah, and the context that came up when I heard this question was also the fact that Knight of Thrain lady was a half-elf, and they started talking about that. And so I wasn't sure what... I mean, Ari hates the fact that the program is coming back into his life. Like, that was something that he wanted to leave in the dust and never think about again. So no, that part of his old world creeping into his current world is horrible, and he wishes Falco would get on his ship back to Khyber. Tommel's a more interesting case because Ari does believe what he told the others after the conversation with Tommel, of believing that Tommel may just be a product of his environment and he's spending time with the Stormhammers. So that's the ideology and the mindset that he's going to begin to take on. And that if Ari can spend some time with Tommel and they can become friends, and maybe he can save this person that he once considered a mentor and a friend.
Just needs to get him away from those kids with their wild hair and their rock and roll music
and their spiky clothes. And then in terms of the half-elf stuff, which I don't know if that's what Eric intended. I mean, Ari never wants to leave that behind. Ari would love to, and we kind of talked about Ari never left that behind. He found the half-elf district. He's been helping people. He helps put on Unity dinners still. That's not something that obviously has been touched on in the show. But that's something that, no, he would never want to leave behind, that part of his culture and his heritage. So, yeah.
I'm curious. Ari spent some amount of time in the program, not traveling around, and we kind of addressed this with Ari being pretty eager to go when the opportunity finally arose, or when the opportunity finally crashed down on you disastrously.
Not when the door opened, when the wall caved in.
Right. Do you think there's anything Ari was any ways in which Ari would have been attempting to hold on to his Korovar culture? I guess not lifestyle exactly, because that would have been an option, but his Korovar culture while he was in the program, when he was stuck and couldn't go out and do the things he would like to do now?
You know, that's a tough one, because it's just, what can you, I mean, you could, try to do a unity dinner in the mess hall, but that would seem very forced, and like, that's not what those are. It's not just people getting together. There's more purpose to it. And so, no, I think that his time in the program was probably the darkest time of Ari's life, because he felt like his culture and his world had been fully ripped away from him. Because even after his family died, he could still, go and find other Korovar to connect with and have dinner with and that kind of thing, and still hold on to like the threads of his life. But then once the program happened, he just, he would have contextualized it was ripped away from him. And, and I think that's why as soon as they got to Stormreach, he leaned so hard back into it, is because, like I said regarding Eric's question, the program was a time in his life that he never wants to think about again, much less relive. So yeah.
I'm interested to see what opportunities we have to explore that, because I think, and maybe we talked about doing some flashbacks to the period between session 0 and session 1, because one of the things that interests me about that aspect of Ari's life is what's it like to be cut off from a culture, and then try to come back into it years later, after, really just paradigm shifting things in the world have happened. Maybe not specifically paradigm shifting things for the Korovar, but for everyone in this world.
Yeah.
And what's the, do you deal with sort of imposter syndrome, or do you deal with the sense of, well, where have you been? Like, what are the awkwardnesses and the difficulties of coming back into a culture that is yours, but which you've been away from? I think that's very interesting.
Well, and I think also if people knew where Ari went, and without the context of why he was in that program, because, I've obviously painted the Korovar for Ari's purposes as being these very freedom-loving, nomadic, giving, communal people. And so going off to join an army, essentially, to go take the war to other people would, for I imagine a lot of subsets of the Korovar culture, be a betrayal of that culture and that ideology. And so that would add to the awkwardness and the hurt a bit, is if Ari wasn't given the chance to explain, no, I was ostensibly kidnapped.
Sure.
But so that can be a really painful scene for you to construct in the future. So.
Right. Yes. Yes. Let's see if I can make you cry on the air.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm glad we weren't doing video for that episode.
Yeah.
That was that. If you haven't listened to Eberron Renewed, you probably don't know what we're talking about. There's an episode of Eberron Renewed that was just me and Eric, and he made me weep like a little, like a child. It was great.
Yes.
But you were not subjected to my face while that was going on, which is.
I mean, probably, I was, but you were.
Well, Eric, yes, but you, the viewer, were not subjected to my face if you were a listener to that.
Yes.
Which is probably best for everyone.
Oh.
On a lighter note, Darren asks, same thing he's asked for everyone. He wants to know what you think Ari's Magic the Gathering card color, or I guess colors, as he puts it, would be.
So yeah, I did play Magic the Gathering kind of in the same context that Philip talked about back in Boy Scouts. It was a thing to do. And then actually, a few years ago, my boss at the time played Magic the Gathering and invited me over to his house with all of his friends to play. So I don't have a strong understanding. I had to look at the wiki at what the colors mean, and I was like, oh, this sounds good. So I went with blue-red, because blue, knowledge, deceit, deliberate, and then red, freedom, emotion, impulsive, active, destructive. So that pairing of the knowledge and deceitfulness mixed with the emotion and the impulsiveness seemed to be a good cocktail, because that's not something that we've really touched on with Ari. Is, I mean, he has a 16 intelligence. He's a very smart person. He's just has no way to apply that because of his incredibly low wisdom. So he's just so yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. Now I want to know, so maybe Darren will tell us in the comments on this video, were your guesses correct? I assume that you had guesses as to what colors the various characters were, and now that we've gotten through all of them, I'm curious as to how close Darren's guesses would have been.
Yeah.
So maybe Darren will tell us in the comments or over on the Discord. All right, and then we had several questions from Mark. And we're going to go through them in order.
Yeah.
It says, you've made it sound like Ari was somewhat active in the city prior to the start of campaign, unlike the other party members, with Shade and Ezri's jobs being mostly out in the jungle, taking the most on adventures out into the jungle, and Pog having really the only normal job among all of them. Are there things that Ari used to do in the city that he misses? How is his time out in the city different with the other player characters tagging along? I think you and I actually had a conversation about this recently.
So addressing the first question, Ari, I mean, granted, it's been a week, like in the context of the multiple years. So, but Ari hasn't gotten to perform, which he loves doing. And also kind of touching on, he hasn't gotten to go to any Unity dinners or interact with the core of our culture much, because, other stuff has come up. I mean, that at the end of the last episode where it was kind of like, okay, what do you all go do? Ari obviously could have gone to do one of those things, but Falco's in town and he needs to figure out why. So yeah, there are things that Ari misses about his life before. And referencing the conversation that Philip and I had, his time out in the city with the other player characters. I mean, Ari is very much, I mean, like you said to Ezri, he's a bounty hunter, but not for people, just for items and things. Like, hey, I need this thing, go find it. Or going and ruining the day of archaeologists that find artifacts from Khyber and then bring them to Stormreach to sell them back to the people that once owned them. And so, he's used to talking to people and greasing wheels and making deals and all that kind of stuff. And, that's harder with 3 other people that have thoughts and opinions on a situation and a circumstance, and might at any time cast Charm Person. but so that's been the biggest adjusting point for Ari, I feel like, is...
Or Thunderwave.
Yeah. To be fair for Shade, that's rarely a conscious decision. She just kind of, you spook her and she blasts you. But, or Pog just shouting the truth, or, so Ari is not used to having a group discussion. He's used to very one-on-one, back and forth negotiations, that kind of thing. And so that's been a big adjustment for him, is having to take the thoughts and feelings and actions of others around him into consideration while doing this. So
yeah.
I
think that's probably for most of the characters. I think what's interesting, when we had our pre-game discussion, one of the things I asked was, what's the nature of y'all's job, of the group's job in the city that you've been doing? And I don't recall where it began, but over the whole group was, I think we have individual normal jobs. And so everybody in the group has a job where they don't have to consider what a team is doing.
Yeah.
Right? Shade takes people out on expeditions into the jungle, but it's Shade is the guide, and Shade leads people out to where they want to go. Her only concern is, is their safety, but she is the expert. They're not gonna be questioning or having the authority to tell her what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, Pog tends bar, but
Pog's in customer service, so he has plenty of people telling him what to do and things to consider, but bless Pog.
Right.
Bless Colin. The opportunity to play in a fantasy world, and what does he do? I want to work in food service. Okay.
And then likewise, Esri's dealing is with Geralt or with any other customers or dealers that he works with in selling herbs and poisons and things like that. It's still one-on-one. And then, likewise, as we said, Ari. And so I think one of the things that's, Mark asked a question about inter-party conflict in a second, but I think one of the biggest sources of that inter-party conflict is the fact that everyone is used to being their own boss, more or less, of being in an individual job and not having to worry about the desires or interests of the group. On their job, obviously. In general, yes, I think everybody worries about the interests of the group, but.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also think that the four party members have such distinct views on how to approach a problem and deal with a situation that when you bring them all together, the four of them see a problem and all four of them have a different idea on what's needed to fix this situation. And like you said, all of them are used to not having to worry about anybody else, so they all just dive onto the
everybody just goes. I will fix it.
Yes. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Next, also from Mark. Also, Ari seems to be a very headstrong character who believes he is right in most situations.
I don't know about that.
But was quick to admit Pog and Esri had valid opinions during the Boggle Hunt. How do you find a balance between playing your character as you envision them versus adapting based on what other player characters do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I just try to acknowledge when somebody else has a good idea, I guess. Like, it didn't feel compromising to who Ari is to admit that, yeah, okay, maybe we don't need to go gallivanting around town and say our names and location and everything like Esri's saying, but at the same time, being truthful occasionally, like Pog is preaching, is also probably a good idea in some circumstances. And maybe Ari doesn't need to be so quick to disguise self into a warforged to try to talk his way out of a situation. And so I had a very clear, and this is just how I create characters and play them. I had a very clear vision of who Ari was when the campaign started. And, this is good. I have a YouTube video on this very channel that you can go check out about this kind of thing. I had a very clear snapshot of who Ari was at session 1. Beyond that point, the campaign is designed to change that. I feel like that's the function of playing this game, is allowing circumstances and situations to change what that snapshot is. And so, yeah, Ari is very headstrong and believes that he is right and he knows best, but at the same time, when he's proven wrong, he's not above going, yeah, that could have gone better. So yeah, that's kind of to answer your question of balancing. I don't feel like it's a balance. Like I'm playing the character as I envisioned them at the start, and then adapt based on everything that happens moving forward. So
cool. And this is a question Mark has asked to the other characters. Is there a point where Ari would decide to leave the group whether for his own safety or for theirs? Who would he have the hardest time leaving behind?
I think obviously any person has a breaking point where they would leave their friends behind. Like, I mean, it would, break your heart. But if it's like, if I stick around, you're going to die, then probably it'd be good for me to leave. And I've played in campaigns where I've had characters because of various circumstances. I was like, you know what, this character needs to go. And I enjoy playing this character, but it's time. So I wouldn't be above Ari leaving the group from like a meta standpoint. I would hate to, because I love playing Ari. I love Ari as a character. And yeah, Ari would leave the group for their safety, definitely. His own safety, I think that's a more loaded circumstance and would require more context than
Sure.
You all are a danger to me, so I'm going to go. It may be more of a like if Soren were to come back at some point in the campaign and the other three embrace Soren with open arms. It was like, oh my gosh, yes, we totally believe that you never intended us any ill harm. Ari might leave. Ari might be like, I cannot and will not believe that, and I thought that you all were different people than you clearly are, so bye. And so I think that's more, rather than his own safety, his own like mental and emotional safety rather than physical safety. If
Sure.
he feels a betrayal or something, then he would leave. Who would he have the hardest time leaving behind? Probably, I don't know. Because none of it is for like concern of their well-being. Like, it's just based on the relationship that he has with each of them. And I think probably he would have the hardest time leaving Pog behind, just because they have so much fun together. And I feel like he has a connection with Pog, and they counteract each other really well. Like, Pog is this very endearing, honest, open person that is rough around the edges, and Ari is kind of the opposite side of that coin, of a very refined, collected person that is not straightforward and not as whole as Pog presents himself to be. And so, yeah, that would probably be the hardest one. So
Cool. And then last one from Mark. The interparty conflict in this campaign is fascinating. We're so glad you think so. Do you think there is a tipping point for Ari when it comes to Ezri not trusting him, pushing Ari's buttons, Pog questioning Ari's intelligence, or the group in general ignoring Ari during that scene with Donnabella's mother? I know you've joked about Ari's lack of melee ability, but narratively, is there a point where Ari would punch a party member or lash out? What would Ari at the end of his rope look like?
This is a really interesting question. And I mean, I just touched on one tipping point of like that feeling of betrayal of, but in terms of what's currently going on, I was actually in Colin's stream, a couple days ago talking about the latest arc that we had just recorded, and jokingly talked about like it was Ari got really close to breaking the PvP seal at one point because he was just so blood was boiling kind of thing. But then I said, but the problem is Ari can't just punch somebody. He can only cast spells. So if he's going to do PvP, it's going to escalate really quickly. So no, I don't know. It's a hard thing to talk about like, lashing out at another player character, because I feel like, and I don't, tragically, I think this is the least likely scenario, maybe not the least likely, but Colin and I have such a rapport and understanding of one another because we've been friends for so long that Ari could pull his gun on Pog and even fire at him, and Colin would just be in the moment and react, based like within the context of the conversation they're having, the situation they're having. And I think we've touched on this, but this is me getting to know RA and Casey, like as people, in addition to as players at a table. And so, when you make that decision to punch another player's character or cast a spell at them or something like that, that is potentially a pretty dicey situation, because there's the potential of taking away that player's agency with your action and stuff like that. And so from a meta standpoint, no, I don't think there would be a point where Ari would lash out at Ezri or Shade, or even Pog, because once again, lack of reason to. But that's more of a metatextual standpoint. There have been plenty of times where Ari has wanted to punch Ezri, and there's been plenty of times where Ezri has wanted to punch Ari. But Ari at the end of his rope, I think Ari just becomes Ari withdraws. Like Ari, like normally this very outgoing, gregarious, boisterous kind of person. When Ari's in turmoil, he just shrinks into himself and removes himself from a situation because of his past with his abilities. Because in the past, when he's gotten scared or overly emotional, he killed somebody.
Yeah.
Like, and he doesn't he has better control on his powers than Shade does, but he doesn't know what his mark's going to do next. And so if he gets really angry, specifically like focused angry at somebody, who knows what could happen?
What happens? Yeah.
And so removing himself, shrinking back into himself, and focusing on something else is kind of what he does when he is at the end of his rope and ready to freak out, kind of thing. And so, yeah, that's what Ari looks like at the end of his rope. It's not overly dramatic. And I'm sure there's a tipping point where Ari says, F this, and just goes full Dark Phoenix, but that hasn't come yet. So, yeah.
I'm curious. I feel like and I think RA has kind of discussed this. I feel like we're looking at Ezri at the end of his rope right now, or pretty close to it. How far do you think Ari is from the end of his rope with the routine of life that he's established being suddenly and fairly impressively disrupted by events in the last several days? Or is Ari rolling with it more?
I think Ari's rolling with it more because he's lived a much more active lifestyle. Like, he's had run-ins with the Stormhammers. He's had to duck and hide in an alleyway, presumably, and he's gone and stolen things from a vendor. And so while he hasn't been firing his gun in the street or going like ham with his abilities out there, it feels like it's escalating a little bit, but especially with everyone else being around, but it certainly doesn't feel as dramatic as what Ezri's lifestyle was, turning up to 11. It's just like a 4 or a 5 right now for Ari. So Ari isn't near the end of his rope. In most circumstances, there have been some situations where Ari's frustration and like blood pressure has started to spike a little bit. I mean, the biggest moments thus far in the campaign is the charm person moment. That that really struck a nerve with Ari, and unfortunately, a lot of things continued to happen after that moment that I don't know if we'll ever get a point where Ari's feelings on that situation will get hashed out. But yeah, so there have been moments where Ari has spiked a little bit, but it's mostly just from like snippets of a circumstance, not the overall escalation of things that have been happening. So yeah.
Cool. And then we had a couple of questions from Richard. A couple of them are one of them is just for Eric.
Hey.
Do you have free time outside of podcast, YouTube, Twitch, and sleeping? Assuming you sleep.
Yeah, I do have free time, and I do sleep. Not a whole heck. Well, okay. Being perfectly honest, one of the benefits of my current job is that I work from home, so I can literally like fall out of bed, grab a cup of coffee, and I'm at work ready for the day. So I don't have to be up a couple of hours before work starts to, get ready so I can stay up later working on things in my day job. But, I have my whiteboard of doom over here that has a bunch of columns labeled YouTube, Twitch, Eberron Renewed, Knowledge Check, LOL, social media, all that kind of stuff. And, I have things listed on things I need to get done that week. And so I have a system in place to keep myself on track and keep myself moving. But, it's fun. It's like editing stuff, like the technical side of all of this is something that I can kind of go into autopilot on, like Philip paints minis and does that. And it's a very like just good thing to do to flow with the time and stuff. And podcasting, YouTube is that for me. Twitch is a bit more performative. It's not super relaxing, but I get to play video games while I do it. And so,
Yeah.
So And most of the reason I started streaming on Twitch was just so I would have a set time that I could play video games, because that was something I was not getting to do ever. I was like, if I stream on Twitch, then I have to play games. So
There you go. That's interesting. Speaking of editing, Richard asks, how does editing Khyber Shards, which is minimal but video, compare to Eberron Renewed? And about how much time do you tend to spend on each?
So, I mean, they're very different, because with Eberron Renewed, we're trying to create a much tighter product. And so I have to actively listen to the whole episode and make cuts. And, while we're recording, we're a lot more lackadaisical than we are with Khyber Shards, where, we'll go off on tangents while we're recording Eberron Renewed or, whatever, because I'm being a much more active editor in that one. Khyber Shards, I listen to once through, just, find the little thing that goes at the beginning of the episode, and to make sure that there's no big audio or video errors or anything like that. But Khyber Shards, I typically spend however long the episode is plus 30 minutes on that. Eberron Renewed, typically it's however long the episode is times 2.5. So if it's a hour-and-a-half long episode, about 4-ish hours on it. So yeah, that's about the ratio. And then YouTube videos are those are much longer. So
Yeah, I bet so. Yeah.
it's so much harder when you have a script. Like having a script sucks, because you have to do takes and you have to repeat things, and then you have to edit those, and yeah. So anyway,
And Richard also asks, what is your favorite thing about Ari? And what aspect of Ari are you most looking forward to exploring in future sessions?
favorite thing about Ari. I mean, probably out of all the characters that I've played before, which is a tragically small number in a campaign, Ari felt the most realized. Like it had the clearest snapshot at the beginning of the game. I think I talked about this in stream or in a YouTube video at some point, but like when we walked into the ship's cat, I already knew before the campaign started that Ari's favorite animal was cats. Like, and I did not tell Philip that. That was just a thing. And so because I knew that, I was like instantly, oh yes, Ari has a cat here, a favorite cat.
Sure.
He loves coming to this place because cats are his favorite animal. The half and half was a thing that I had concocted prior to the campaign start. Ari has a favorite food. And so, all of these things that don't like define who Ari is in situations to where I have to be like, that's what my character would do. But in any circumstance, I have a lot of tools in my bag to say, oh, well, Ari orders this. He thinks this way. This is his preferred drink, whatever. And so I love having a character like that, because it's actually easier to me, because being a theater nerd and that being very much how I approach my time at the table, it's like I have the script and I don't have to improv as much, because I know the tapestry that Ari comes from. And also I don't think I've ever gotten to play a social first character. I think in all the campaigns that we've been in, I've been a more martially focused character. So, and I mean, I built Ari to not be, he can cast spells and he has Eldritch Blast, which, D&D is inherently there was a conversation going on in our Discord about D&D as a combat simulator. And I think the telling thing to me about D&D, unlike a system like Genesis, you can create a character that has no place in combat, like is utterly useless. You can't in D&D. Like I can't build Ari to have zero function in combat. He's always going to have something that he can do in the structured combat time. If I could have created a character with no place in combat, that would have been who I made Ari to be, because I wanted Ari to be not a fighter, like just a very happy, caring, empathetic person. And so, yeah, in terms of what I'm looking forward most to exploring in future sessions, the stuff with the houses, like that was such a big part when I was like creating Ari, is his like hatred of the 12 and the Dragmark houses. And so as soon as we get to start, yes, excellent. As soon as we start getting to touch on that a bit more, and how that manifests differently from somebody like Tommel, because Ari's not going to start shooting people in the street, but
Sure.
Ari does tend to write off anybody that associates with the houses, which we have talked about before on the show. And so him and Tommel are not so different. It's just what they do with that bias against those people that I think makes them distinct. I'm excited to get legs on that in terms of how Ari does that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, that is all of our questions. We hope you have enjoyed this. If you have, please feel free to hit the like or subscribe button, or both, actually. I don't know why I made that an or statement.
Preferably both,
down there.
But...
Leave us a comment. We have a new comment goal. Now
Yes.
that I'm wearing airship goggles. Eric, why don't you tell the people about the new comment goal?
Yes, so to give Philip a break and let him plan his next grand costume piece, I'm going to take on the reins, and if we hit 50 comments on a recent video, not the same video, don't just put 10 more comments on the one that broke 40.
Right.
But on a recent video, if we hit 50 comments, then I will do up my hair and my facial hair like Ari. Which those of you that don't know what he looks like, well, he's been in a couple of the thumbnails, but pull my hair back into a ponytail, trim the beard up, and he's got a scar going over his eye that leaves a gap in his eyebrow. So I'll do the eyebrow slit as well.
So I'm just saying, guys, there's the possibility that you do this and Eric messes up in the process of doing the eyebrow scar.
Oh, I've already been told that I will not be one doing the cutting by my roommate, who when I told her, she was like,
"That's a wise decision."
Okay, I'm doing that then, because you're not going to try to do that to your own eyebrow. So yeah. So, but more importantly, Miley is not a fan of this idea. So if you also want to, I did not consult her before I made this promise. So
wow, nice.
Yeah. If you're slightly sadistic and want to put me in a sticky situation with my wife, then also comment below.
Outstanding. All right. Well, if you'd like to get in touch with us, we are on all the social medias at The Geek Pantheon, on Facebook and Twitch and TikTok and Instagram, and of course, obviously on YouTube. And I think I hit all of them. And also
Twitter.
On Twitch. Oh, on Twitter.
You said Twitch instead of Twitter, so.
That's what it is. Yes. Yeah. But we're also are on Twitch, and Eric
still accurate.
Yes, Eric streams regularly on Tuesday nights and on Sunday mornings. Is that
Sunday
still
mornings.
planned? Sunday mornings, and often on a third night.
Monday nights,
somewhere
I
during
think,
the
is
week.
going to be
Monday
what
nights
it
is where we
ends
are.
up being. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well,
Yeah, come
so you can
hang
find
out
us
with me.
there. And come hang with Eric. Eric is a very interactive streamer, and with his group, and plays very interesting games, and often games that are just too uncomfortable for me to watch because
We're
I
done with that
just
series,
can't
though.
handle The Walking
We're
Dead.
done with The Walking Dead. So
Okay,
if you,
well,
if
maybe
you
I'll
don't like
come
super
back.
sad, slightly gruesome games, come on over. We're done with them forever. I don't know. I'm not going to do another horror game, but there are other ones out there. But
Yeah. But you have finished all The Walking Dead that there is, right?
yes, I finished the final
For now,
season.
presumably.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, so come hang out. It's a good time. So
And there's usually some D&D talk, so if you like
Yes,
D&D, there's
frequently.
usually some
Yeah,
D&D chatting going on. So
talk Khyber Shards, talk Eberron Renewed, talk other D&D stuff. Feel free. Come on, hang out.
cool. Well, thank you so much for watching. This has been Khyber Shards. I'm Philip.
I'm Eric.
Thanks for rolling with us.